like a car that doesn't drive? A traveler who never leaves town? Or paint that is never used? So is the man of faith who does no good deeds. A light without power. A well without water. Faith without works. These are all the same.
Well, good morning. For those of you that are surprised to see me up again here so soon, you can imagine how surprised I was when John said to me he was going to be out of town this week and that he wanted to know if I'd be willing to preach in the series of James. And I said, sure, I'll give it a go if you're willing. So here we are. As we know, James is all about a faith that works. And as John pointed out in a recent Facebook post, true religion is also what James is talking about. And I think his Facebook post, if I got it right, Sherry is the one who does Facebook, I do not. It says, the real measure of true religion is how you treat people who cannot repay you. That's a great point to bear in mind as we delve into today's text. As we've already discovered, God works very differently than we do. John pointed out last week that our efforts, our works, should be from God's love, not for God's love. This morning we're going to see another of the very different ways in which God operates. It has to do with how he sees and treats people. And as you'll see this morning, it's very differently than we tend to. Back in my days of as owning a software company, ACS used to really look forward to the Christmas season. We've just been through that, and software company, as you can imagine, it's not a very exciting place. People writing code, bearing down, not exactly the bastion of excitement. And each year, we tried to make a very big deal of the Christmas celebration. And Sherry would endeavor to find a restaurant that we were pretty confident most of our employees wouldn't splurge for. You know, these software engineers are fairly well paid, but even no matter how well you're paid, people's lives have other priorities with their money, and a lot of times it doesn't include a really expensive restaurant. So Sherry found this place in Tampa. It's referred to as Malio's, since gone, but in its day, it was the place in Tampa for the athletic celebrities. One such celebrity, who you may be familiar with, was a guy named George Steinbrenner. And Steinbrenner even had the dining room named after him. And at the time he was still alive, a lot of the Tampa Bay Bucks went there, Tampa Rays. It was a place teeming with celebrity. And we thought, well, this would be a cool place. Sherry and I went there. We tried it out. Dinner was good. So the day of the event comes, and we've got our employees and their families in from all over the country. We are really excited. This is just, it's our biggest event of the year. And we all arrive. We're there in the foyer of the restaurant, and we're waiting, and we're waiting, and we're waiting. And then finally, without any commentary or nothing, we get ushered as a group into the main dining room to sit at separate tables. Now, one of the things that Sherry was very keen on was just getting a room where it was big enough so that even no matter how many there was of us, 20, 30, whatever, we could all sit around and you could have this sort of a dinner and around where you could talk with people and be very conversant. So as you can imagine, the main dining room in an Italian restaurant, it's a loud place, wasn't what we had in mind. So we finally got the attention of the waitstaff and said, this wasn't our arrangement. This is an annual dinner. We had arrangements for the Steinbrenner room. And they said, oops, I see, I'm slipping here, sorry. And they said, oh, we're sorry. We had an unexpected request for the room. Okay. Somebody showed some favoritism, and Us, not so much. And I got to tell you, that was the worst Christmas dinner ever. When you're on the receiving end of when someone else is shown favoritism at your expense, it's unpleasant. So this morning, we're going to be addressing the first 7 verses in James chapter 2. And this is the text that deals with favoritism or discrimination, if you please. And I need to make a note before we get going that this is a passage, we have verses and we have cutoffs and it's nicely bound for us, but James was writing about a topic. And his topic in this particular case extended through verse 13. And I only bring that up because it's important that we understand as we're looking at this text where James was going with this and how he concluded it, which John will handle next week. However, this is a relatively uncomfortable text in ways, and I want you to understand that the key truth that James is addressing here, the key thing for you to take away from this morning, is that to those who were shown mercy, they should extend mercy to others. If you're the recipient of God's mercy, you should then be a conduit of that mercy to other people. So, chapter 2, verse 1. I know that John pointed out last week as I was watching, we were in Tampa last week, and he made a point about the word dear when James uses the word dear, and it's a very a loving term. I, on the other hand, when I see James and you're reading throughout the book and you see the term my brothers, or your Bible might say my brothers and sisters, or brethren, what he is essentially saying is, hey, pay attention to me. I got something important to tell you. That's sort of the way you can look at my dear brothers. It's a lot nicer way than just yelling at somebody, but it's effectively saying attention. As believers in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ, don't show favoritism. Any of you who know me at all, I see a good part of my family is here, know that I'm not a big fan of nuance. Okay, if you got something to say, say it. Say it plainly, get on with it. And don't show favoritism. One of my favorite, just, you got something, here's the command, easy to follow, no gray area, I got it. No favoritism. And apparently, to the crowd that he was talking to, this wasn't plain enough. Because what he goes on to do now is make an illustration. And that illustration takes up in verse 2. Suppose a man comes into your meeting wearing a gold ring and fine clothes, and a poor man in shabby clothes also comes in. If you show special attention to the man wearing fine clothes and say, here's a good seat for you, but say to the poor man, you stand there or you sit at my feet, have you not discriminated among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? Wow. Judges with evil thoughts. Do I need to remind anybody in the room that James is talking to the church? He's not talking about the barbarians at the gate. He's not talking about those who have no idea about Jesus or faith or anything, where, frankly, that's the kind of behavior you'd expect. He's talking to the church. Now, the word translated evil here is translated it's used some 90 times in the New Testament, and it's translated as either wicked or evil. These are not two words that I would like associated with my behavior in any way, shape, or form. No one likes to think of themselves as evil or wicked, unless they really just don't care at all about goodness and right and proper behavior. It's also the same word that Jesus used in the Beatitudes. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 11, he says, blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Interestingly enough, Jesus is talking about that in the Beatitudes, and this is somewhat contextually relevant to this text. Showing favoritism is nothing short of evil or wicked. It's not a comfortable thought, because if we're all honest, most of us like it when favor is shown to us. In the business world, it is not an uncommon thing for you to take care of your best customers. See your best customer through the door, boom, you're on them. You're going to treat them like gold. That customer will get some favor. It's a natural thing in the world's economy. However, God's economy tends to set things on end often. I don't know if you found it, but generally speaking, Jesus was a radical in his time, and God has been a radical from the beginning. What he proposes behavior-wise is generally, in many ways, quite different than what we find acceptable in business. Take our Marlio experience, okay? Our Marlio experience was dreadful if you were me trying to take care of my employees, right? I was trying to do something special for them, and that didn't pan out. Now, the celebrity that showed up in the last second and said, boom, I want the room, boom, they got the George Steinbrenner dining room. Really wasn't one of my finest testimony moments, all the things that were going through my head at that time. Okay? I get to know me a little bit better, and you realize that, particularly when I was younger, not always the best testimony. Okay, and I don't say that with pride. I say that with a degree of embarrassment, and also admitting that there's a part of that I enjoy about me, because I don't like it when things aren't done in a right, proper, and decent way. And I tend to be pretty belligerent and not very understanding at times. And I'm confident that there are some of you out there that have a similar struggle. And you see, this is where what Jesus calls us to can be decidedly uncomfortable, because Jesus expects more of us than we do. Okay? Jesus is, well, he's God for one thing, and we don't have that going for us. All right? But I want to just make I want to draw your attention right now with respect to this whole matter of treating people. If you would turn in Luke chapter 20. Let's just examine Jesus for a second with regard to this behavioral thing of favoritism. Favoritism is a nice way of saying prejudice, okay? Some of your translations may actually have had the word prejudice or preference, okay? In Luke chapter 20, the high priest and the scribes had about as much of Jesus as they could stand. I mean, as far as they were concerned, he was turning their gig upside down, and he was really a problem for them. So if you're familiar with this passage, this is the passage which leads up to, is it right to pay Caesar taxes? And what I think is remarkable and instructive for us in this morning is that even Jesus' enemies understood that he showed no preference or prejudice whatsoever or favoritism to anyone. Let's look at verse 21. The chief priests and the scribes, so the spies questioned him, "Teacher, we know that you speak and teach what is right, and that you do not show partiality, but teach the way of God in accordance with truth." You do not show partiality. Jesus was so good at not showing favoritism that even his enemies recognized it. That's pretty powerful. Now, if we could all emulate Christ more perfectly, we would never show favoritism, ever. I mean, you just wouldn't. However, just like today, the church of James's time struggled. They struggled with a lot of things. They struggled with social, economic, and racial tensions. Now, granted, the racial tensions in Jesus' day was between the Jews and the Gentiles. If you're not familiar with the word Gentile, it's actually in the Hebrew, it's a word. I was raised in a Jewish neighborhood as a Catholic, and the word translated Gentile is the word goy. And the word goy is essentially another way of saying dog. So the Jews didn't think very much of anybody who wasn't a Jew, and the Samaritans, as you probably know, were half-breeds. So as far as the Jews were concerned. So Jesus, when he came up to the Samaritan woman, for one thing, he was talking to a woman. His disciples were shocked about that, if you recall. And it was a double whammy. Oh my gosh, he's talking, not only is he talking to a woman, he's talking to a Samaritan. How is this possible? Because Jesus saw things the way his Father saw things. What did Jesus say over and over again? I do nothing except what the Father has me do. That's a Jager paraphrase. You won't find that scripture just the way I said it. But we all understand that Jesus, as God, was capable of seeing everyone the way the Father saw them, in his image. So, moving to verses 5 through 7, James frames up the inconsistency between God's attitude towards people, God's eyes of seeing everyone, and the behavior of some. Okay, let's look at the text. Listen, my dear brothers, there he goes again. Has not God chosen those who are poor in the eyes of the world to be rich in faith and to inherit the kingdom? He promised those who loved him. But you have insulted the poor. Is it not the rich who are exploiting you? Are they not the ones who are dragging you into court? Are they not the ones who are slandering the noble name of him to whom you belong? Proverbs has an awful lot to say about the poor and court. As you guys may recall from even just last month when I was up here, I read Proverbs a lot. And in Proverbs 22:22, it says, do not exploit the poor because they are poor, and do not crush the needy in court. Okay? So here's the behavior of these rich Jewish people at the time, and they are taking Christian people to court. Anyone who associated whatsoever with Jesus or his followers, they were after. And they would come in and they would they'd come in and be shown this favor just so that they could take note of who was there. And then afterwards, a lot of people found themselves in Jewish court. Proverbs 29:7 says, the righteous care about justice for the poor, but the wicked have no such concern. Now, there we go again, wicked. Okay, judges with evil thoughts, wicked thoughts. Isn't it interesting that that word finds itself there as well when it comes to this pattern of treating people in a certain preference? The they being addressed here has moved from the people in the church to the rich Jews being courted in verse 2 through 4. You should understand that among the Jews, the administration of justice at this time was in a miserable state of corruption. I think the kindest way I can put this is that they were not embracing Proverbs 22:22, which they should have known. In fact, the rich were going out of their way, as I just said, to punish and whoops. Apparently, John's ear is smaller than mine. Sorry about that. They were going out of their way to punish anyone associated with Christ. So let's see if I can bring this a bit closer to home. Before I sold my company, the company that eventually wound up purchasing my software company was courting us pretty hard. They were a fast-growing company with an excellent product and a great reputation, and they were spending money, and a lot of it, on my employees anytime and every time they could. Seemed like a perfect fit on some levels. It was. They had the money and the interest to be able to take my company, and they were interested in hiring all of my employees. They weren't interested in me, which suited me just fine. So there was this enamorment with, ooh, look at us. We've got money. We want to buy you, and life is going to be great, and we're going to take your company. I mean, suffice it to say, I'm standing here. I mean, I sold the company. They bought the company. However, wasn't too long after the transaction was closed, and a couple of really high-profile deals went sideways, and before I knew it, I found myself in a lawsuit. Are you kidding me? I wasn't even there. I wasn't part of the company. It was these things happened after I was completely out of the picture, but sometimes people will sue you and it has nothing to do with anything you've done. Which similarly, in context, I mean, granted, it's not dead on point. However, what it boiled down to is that the really rich company came along and, oh, it was really all cool for me, and then I'm in a lawsuit. And I'm in a lawsuit because of things that were being done by somebody else. And in the case of the new believers at this time who James is talking to, let's be honest, many of them never saw Jesus. They had no idea. They were followers. And they were getting hauled into court by these rich people. And God bless you. And so it's not exactly the same, but I can tell you I didn't enjoy that process. Okay? I didn't enjoy any of that. The church in the text is being reprimanded by James for coveting the attention and money of the rich man who came along, while many of them were winding up in court merely associating with anyone connected with Jesus. Okay, that is the point. God's way of seeing people is completely different than our way, naturally. The way we tend to, because, I mean, let's be honest, everyone likes to be treated special. I would challenge any one of you to say that it doesn't put a smile on your face when somebody shows you preference and says, oh, so good to see you. Why don't you come over here? It's the nice seat. We've been waiting for you to come in. And I mean, that is, that is very, very nice. When you're the recipient of preference, it's nice. When you, on the other hand, are bumped, like we were at Malio's, so that somebody else can be showed preference, not so nice. So James is taking them to task here, and essentially, if we kind of fast forwarded on to verse 13, what James then arrives to when he comes to the conclusion of the matter is he says, listen, you received God's mercy indiscriminately. In fact, I skipped over one of my passages, and I think that it's worth noting. In Job chapter 34, God is lecturing Job at this point. And in verse 19, he declares that he shows no partiality to princes, nor regards the rich more than the poor. Now, if you would, just turn with me in Matthew chapter 25, starting in verse 34. Jesus has just completed the parables of the 10 virgins, the bags of gold, and the Bema Seat judgment that was going to be coming. And in verse 34, he says, and this is a very familiar passage, then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. A stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger, invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" And the king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." So recalling today's truth about the key truth about those of us who have received mercy should extend mercy to others. James is calling all of us to be indiscriminately merciful to everyone. Everyone. And he's warning us not to be too interested in their social, economic, or racial position in life. Here the Lord uses James to remind everyone that rather than covet favor with people whose appearance implies they might be important or wealthy or able to do something for us, instead we should be extending mercy and care to all that we encounter. As best as we can, we should look at everyone as Jesus saw them. It's a tall order. I got to tell you, I don't look at everyone and I wish I could be so grand and tell you, gosh, I just see everyone just flatlined. Everyone is equal. I mean, everyone I encounter. Because the truth of the matter is, we meet some snarky people of whether they have money or not money, or whether they're the same race as you or not. It doesn't really matter. When you meet somebody, you make a judgment pretty quickly as to whether or not you want to have anything more to do with them. Do you not? We all have our favorite kind of fill in the blank. And God just basically says, when anybody shows up, I love them. I did this for you. You do it for them. That's a tall order. I know I fail at it miserably daily. But I'm going to leave you with this thought. Don't raise your hands. However, all of you who are 35 years and older, inside, raise your hand. That's me. Okay? Now, when you're thinking about what kind of a church, Grace, I have to tell you, Sherry and I have said this many times. It's to the point where it's startlingly obvious to us that this is one of the friendliest churches we've ever been to in 30-something years. Doesn't matter what age, doesn't matter what background, doesn't matter what ethnicity, doesn't matter. Everybody here we've met has been gracious and friendly and inviting, and it has been truly a very, very unique church in our lives. And we're delighted to be here. And taking that one step further, Bainbridge is, I've been coming here since 1980, as I mentioned before, and I love coming here. I've always loved coming here. Now, granted, I get some looks because of the tone of my voice or the accent that I have, and yet, despite that, show yourself friendly and you're friendly indeed, right? And so, I mean, I can recall 30 years ago stand in line at was Harvey's, I think, and just there was, I mean, people were visiting. I mean, it was, they were in no hurry to get out and to go. I mean, it was just a very, very friendly place. Now, I say that because as friendly as it is, imagine how much of an impact Grace Church would have if every single one of you was indiscriminately merciful to every person you met. Think about how special a town Bainbridge has the potential to be if everyone in Bainbridge was indiscriminately merciful to everyone. That's the kind of radical stuff Jesus said was possible. He actually didn't make it as a possibility, he just said, do it. Now, I mentioned 35 years. If you're thinking, listen, Roy, it's sweet that you've been here, you think it's a great place, but certain things have been going on here for long before you got here, and there are just certain things, buddy, that are not going to change. Because certain people are just deadbeats or useless or this or that. And I got to tell you, my natural inclination would be to agree with you. It would be to agree with you if it was just me and you chummy talking. And we both were wrong. Because here's the thing. If you think that it's impossible for grace to exhibit indiscriminate mercy, 35 years ago, 10 people in Washington invented a thing called a personal computer. 35 years ago, the personal computer did not exist except for in a lab. 10 people formed Microsoft and revolutionized the entire world. Now, everyone in this church older than maybe the age of 10 has a smartphone these days. Okay? As a matter of calculating power fact, that phone is more powerful than the fastest computers the United States government had at their disposal in 1980. Now, we all kind of, if we were to have a private chat about where things are with our government, I don't want to get into a political thing. I just want to basically say that the church has fallen down on its job, and that's why the government is doing so much for so many. And it's taking from everybody and saying, we have to do this and we have to do that. Okay. The one thing we can acknowledge is that the government has a lot of resources and has had a lot of resources for a really long time. I can tell you that my Casio watch is actually as powerful as the computer that was available to put men on the moon in the 60s. My Casio watch. So when you're thinking that it is ridiculous and impossible for us to be indiscriminately merciful in Bainbridge and in Grace Church, I want you to bear in mind, and just remember, now you're never going to be able to forget it. You're going to pick up your phone and you're going to go, oh man. And that's perfectly fine with me. Because I know that in Philippians 4:13 it says what? I can do some things, kind of a few things, just the hard ones. It says all things. And I promise you, that especially is talking to the things that you don't think you can do. And I'm confident of this as well. If you don't think you can do it, it ain't going to happen. It simply will not happen, because if you don't have enough faith and trust, we were talking about that this morning, weren't we, Daniel? That, the simple truth is that it requires us to have faith and trust in something more capable than we are. More able to treat people right and proper, regardless of the station that they have in life. So I leave you with the challenge of Philippians 4:13. See, it's a challenge, really. I don't think many of you probably have looked at that verse as a challenging verse. But the simple truth is that it is the power of God. All things are possible with God. Or, said another way, what did the angel say? Nothing's impossible with God. That's impossible with man. It's not impossible with God. Let's pray. Father, I am grateful to be here and to speak on this topic, or any topic for that matter. And I pray, Lord, that in some way you would change the heart of just one here, including me, and enable us to be more gracious and more merciful to people when we meet them. And we'll be sure to give you, Jesus, all the praise and all the honor. For we pray in your name. Amen.